In the autumn of 1943, as the Allied landings in southern Italy forced the German army into a hasty withdrawal northward, an invisible war began beneath the surface of the Italian campaign. Few outside the intelligence community knew that American OSS agents, some barely trained, others veterans of earlier covert work, were slipping behind enemy lines, far beyond the reach of Allied support. Their task was straightforward but perilous: map German defensive positions, contact anti-fascist partisans, and build the network that would sustain clandestine operations for the next 2 years. What remains lesser known is that even in these earliest missions, operatives quietly vanished from the record, leaving behind fragments of reports, interrupted radio transmissions, and unexplained absences that still puzzle historians today. The struggle for intelligence in Italy began with geography itself. The peninsula's narrow valleys, jagged mountains, and labyrinthine rural pathways made infiltration exceptionally dangerous. German troops under Field Marshal Albert Kesselring patrolled with ruthless efficiency. Whole villages lived under the threat of reprisals, and the mere rumor of Allied spies could bring down catastrophic retaliation. OSS teams, designated operational groups or OGs, often traveled with a handful of Sten guns, silk escape maps, cyanide capsules, and a small suitcase-sized radio that weighed nearly 30 pounds. Every movement had to be calculated. Every local contact had to be vetted. One betrayal, intentional or coerced, could mean capture. A diary entry from Lieutenant Andrew Hale, an OSS instructor stationed in Bari, recorded the sentiment of the time: "These men march into the hills with only half the information they need. The enemy knows the terrain better than we do, and the partisans know it best. Yet we must trust strangers in the dark." Hale's training reports described the urgency. Agents needed to master demolitions, coded messaging, and Italian dialects in mere weeks. Many came from Italian-American communities, fluent in the language but unprepared for the brutality of occupied Italy. Their first missions were a live crucible. Casualties were expected but never officially acknowledged. By late November 1943, the OSS had begun coordinating with the British SOE across southern and central Italy, carving operational zones around key German strongholds. Naples, Salerno, and Foggia became staging areas for deep penetration operations. One such mission saw a two-man OSS reconnaissance team attempt to reach the outskirts of Cassino, where German engineers were fortifying the Gustav Line. They made it within 5 miles of their objective, transmitting sketches of bunkers and artillery placements before their radio abruptly fell silent. An SOE liaison officer later wrote that Italian locals reported German soldiers conducting house-to-house searches the following morning. Whether the agents were discovered, betrayed, or simply forced to flee remains unknown. Their names appear in early OSS rosters but disappear from later official summaries. The reveal came slowly as declassified fragments emerged decades later. In some newly uncovered Italian partisan accounts, there are references to Americani Fantasma, ghost Americans seen passing through mountain passes but never returning. One partisan leader from Abruzzo recalled guiding 2 English-speaking operatives toward a German supply depot in December 1943. According to his testimony, after he left them at a shepherd's hut, the men were never seen again. No matching OSS report has yet been found. This gap may indicate a lost mission or a deliberately buried one. What modern intelligence officers often point out is how thin early Allied networks were. Today's analysts note how vulnerable the OSS was in 1943. Poor radio encryption, unpredictable partisan loyalties, and a rapidly shifting front line. The lesson echoed in military academies is one of patience. Build local knowledge before launching deep operations. But in 1943, time was a luxury the Allies did not have. German engineers were fortifying every valley, every road, every bridge. Intelligence was urgently needed. Risks had to be taken. As winter settled over the Italian mountains, the OSS pushed deeper, and the pattern of incomplete records, missing names, and half-finished transmissions grew. Some disappearances were almost certainly due to German patrols. Others may have resulted from local suspicion or internal partisan conflicts. But a handful remain unexplained even after the release of thousands of wartime documents. These early missions, overshadowed by larger battles, shaped the entire clandestine campaign to come, and set the stage for even more dangerous infiltrations in 1944. The opening chapter of the OSS struggle in Italy ends with unanswered questions. How many operatives never returned? How many missions remain unrecorded? And how many clues lie buried in Italian archives still not fully examined? What is certain is that the quiet losses of 1943 foretold the perilous operations ahead. missions that would push deeper into German-held Italy and test the limits of Allied covert warfare. In March of 1944, the Italian coastline near La Spezia became the stage for one of the most tragic and controversial OSS operations of the entire war, Operation Ginny II. It began with an alarming intelligence assessment. German forces relied heavily on 2 rail tunnels along the Ligurian coast to reinforce their positions on the Gothic line. Destroying those tunnels could disrupt Wehrmacht logistics for weeks. Yet what few outside intelligence circles realize is how the first attempt, Ginny I, had already failed in February, with the sabotage team forced to abort their landing in rough seas. Still, Washington and the OSS command in Italy pressed forward. The second attempt would go ahead, even as conditions worsened and German patrol density increased. The challenge for the OSS team, drawn from the 2,677th Regiment, was immense. They would be transported at night by PT boat, approach the shore in rubber landing craft, then move inland through rocky coastal terrain heavily monitored by the 135th Fortress Brigade. The team was composed of 15 men, most Italian-Americans fluent in the language, all trained in demolitions. Their equipment included Primacord British-made clam charges, and small arms meant only for emergency defense. The operation was designed for stealth, not combat. But the geography itself was their first enemy. The Ligurian coastline offered few landing points, and the Germans had grown suspicious after detecting unusual boat activity the month before. One surviving training note from OSS instructor Captain Joseph Marini captures the atmosphere. These men will have minutes on the beach. A wrong turn, one light on the shoreline, or a single guard dog can unravel the entire mission. Despite these warnings, the decision to proceed came from higher command. Success meant potentially crippling a German supply artery. Failure was not discussed. The landed team quickly encountered the first sign that something was wrong. According to the lone post-war survivor's testimony, the shoreline appeared more illuminated than expected. German sentries had been repositioned days earlier, possibly due to unrelated partisan activity. Within hours, the team's carefully planned route dissolved into confusion. One squad leader noted in his later debrief that certain landmarks marked on their maps no longer existed. Fences had been moved and civilian paths were blocked. Whether this was coincidental or evidence of German anticipation remains debated among historians. The reveal came on the morning of March 22, when German patrols swept through a ridge area the team believed to be safe. The OSS group, exhausted, disoriented, and unable to locate the tunnels, was surrounded and captured without a fight. They were interrogated by officers of the 135th Fortress Brigade, who quickly identified them as commandos. What happened next became one of the most infamous war crimes committed on Italian soil. Despite the team wearing standard American uniforms, German command concluded they were saboteurs and executed them the following morning under Hitler's Commando Order of 1942. The mystery that lingers is how the Germans managed to intercept the OSS team so quickly and with such precision. Some Italian villagers later claimed they had seen suspicious boat activity prior to the landing and alerted German authorities. Others insisted a local fisherman under duress provided details about unusual nighttime movements offshore. A more unsettling theory suggests the Germans were already monitoring the team's clandestine radio traffic during training phases, though proof has never surfaced. The OSS files related to Ginny II contain redactions and missing documents that have fueled speculation for decades. Modern military historians often highlight the operation as a cautionary tale. Overconfidence in intelligence, reliance on outdated maps, and pressure to produce results all contributed to the team's demise. The Commando Order, considered illegal under the Geneva Convention, underscored the brutal nature of covert operations in the Mediterranean theater. Today, Ginny II is studied in special operations courses as an example of the thin line between daring sabotage and fatal miscalculation. When the war ended, Allied investigators uncovered the execution site near Punta Bianca. The bodies of the 15 OSS men were found buried in shallow pits. The German officers involved were later tried and convicted, though debates persist about whether the swift arrest of the team was due to luck, preparedness, or betrayal. Each newly discovered document adds nuance but never the full answer. As 1944 continued, the OSS did not abandon its operations in Italy, rather, it pushed deeper into German-occupied territory, determined to learn from the failures of Ginny II. But the tragedy left a permanent scar on the organization, reminding every operative that the next infiltration could end in the same abrupt, unexplained way. And in the months ahead, more teams would vanish without a trace, leaving behind questions no archive has fully solved. By the summer of 1944, northern Italy had become a labyrinth of shifting front lines, partisan zones, and tightened German security. Factories in Milan, Turin, and the Lombardy industrial corridor fueled the German war machine with aircraft components, armored vehicle parts, and precision tools. These facilities, protected by the Luftwaffe, Waffen-SS police units, and fascist militias, were essential targets for the OSS. What is less widely known is that one of the most daring infiltration missions into Milan involved only 3 men, operating alone in a dense urban landscape where a single misstep could mean instant execution. Their operation would yield priceless intelligence, and then vanish from the historical record, absorbed into a decades-long mystery that has never been fully explained. The mission began under OSS Special Operations Branch directives issued in June 1944. The Allies needed clear assessments of northern industrial output before launching future offensives across the Gothic Line. Working alongside the British SOE, OSS planners selected 3 operatives from the 2677th Regiment's SI, Secret Intelligence, section. Each man had an Italian background, fluency in local dialects, and training in urban infiltration, rare skills for an organization more accustomed to mountain operations. Their equipment was minimal: false papers, a miniature radio transmitter built into a shaving kit, a concealed camera, and enough lira currency to blend into city life. Their objective was simple in writing but immense in practice: penetrate Milan's industrial districts, identify priority German-controlled factories, confirm production schedules, and establish contact with trusted partisan intermediaries. Traveling north required long exposure to German checkpoints. The team disguised themselves as displaced laborers, moving in small groups aboard freight cars and farm wagons. A partially declassified operational memo from the OSS Bari station records: team will avoid all partisan areas until contact established. No aggressive actions. No signatures. The emphasis on subtlety underscored just how unstable northern Italy had become. Partisan factions were splintered, some loyal to the communist Garibaldi brigades, others aligned with monarchist or Catholic groups, and a few working covertly with Allied intelligence. But there were also infiltration attempts by the fascist Black Brigades, who impersonated partisans to lure suspect civilians into traps. For the OSS team, trusting the wrong intermediary could be fatal. Nevertheless, by mid-July they crossed into Milan under the cover of nighttime factory shifts. The city bore the scars of Allied bombing: collapsed facades, shattered tram lines, and gutted industrial blocks. German Feldgendarmerie patrols monitored major intersections, while fascist militia units roamed the backstreets. Against this backdrop, the team split up and moved into safe houses prearranged through partisan couriers. Their primary target was the Isata Fraschini Works, an aircraft engine manufacturer rumored to be producing parts for German reconnaissance aircraft. Using forged worker permits, one operative shadowed employees entering the plant, noting security rotations and supply trucks. Another surveyed the Breda factories, photographing troop movements and identifying warehouses storing machine tools imported from Germany. On July 17, the team transmitted its first coded message. It confirmed increased production of Daimler-Benz engine components and hinted at accelerated German evacuation plans for certain material stocks. The intelligence was invaluable. But it was the second transmission, sent 3 days later, that has puzzled researchers. Declassified in fragments, the message reads: activity irregular. Movement predicted sooner than expected. Contact uncertain. Adjusting route. Analysts still debate its meaning. Some interpret it as evidence that German forces were preparing to relocate critical machinery to Austria. Others believe the team had identified a possible leak within the partisan network. What happened next remains the most chilling part of the operation. After July 20th, the OSS station in Bari received no further transmissions. Courier routes into Milan reported no sightings of the agents. British SOE officers attempted to retrace their safehouse chain but found each link disrupted by arrests, disappearances, or abrupt relocations. A memo from an SOE liaison officer recorded: local cells compromised. Causes unclear. Cannot rule out internal betrayal. In one neighborhood, fascist militias conducted a series of raids that resulted in dozens of suspected partisans being detained, yet no formal records of prisoners matching the OSS agents' descriptions were ever found. Italian post-war testimonies offer conflicting accounts. One former partisan courier claimed the 3 operatives were last seen heading toward the Greco-industrial district, pursued by a German police convoy. Another source, a factory worker, insisted he saw two English-speaking men being marched away by fascist guards near the Pirelli plant. But none of these statements have been corroborated through documentation. Archival searches in Milan, Berlin, and Rome have yet to produce interrogation files, execution orders, or transport logs. This absence is striking. The Germans typically documented captured spies meticulously. Modern historians suggest several possibilities. The team may have been absorbed into a partisan unit that was later destroyed. Their bodies may lie in one of the many unmarked graves from summer 1944, or more intriguingly, their disappearance may indicate a successful escape southward that was never properly logged in OSS records. A handful of analysts even propose that the team's reports were deliberately buried during post-war intelligence reorganizations. Whatever the truth, the Milan infiltration remains one of the most enigmatic episodes in OSS history. The operation produced valuable intelligence in its brief window of communication, but its sudden, complete disappearance left behind only speculation and a trail of unanswered questions. And as the war pressed on, new missions pushed even deeper into enemy lines, where the dangers and mysteries only intensified. By late 1944, the Apennine Mountains had become the backbone of German defensive planning in Italy, a rugged natural fortress supporting the Gothic Line. Hidden among its dense forests, sheer ridgelines, and valley villages were the telegraph and telephone cables that connected German command centers from Bologna to Florence. These lines were the arteries of the Wehrmacht's communication network, transmitting orders that shaped the movement of entire divisions. It was here that the OSS launched one of its most perilous and least documented operations, an infiltration later referred to in surviving records as Creeper. Unofficially, veterans described it as the mission where silence itself felt like the enemy, silence that concealed patrols, concealed risk, and concealed a near discovery still debated among historians today. The OSS team assigned to Operation Creeper hailed from the 2677th Regiment's operational group units, experienced in mountain warfare and trained extensively with British SOE instructors on field signaling and wiretapping. Their objective was straightforward on paper: locate German telegraph lines in a remote sector of the northern Apennines, splice into the cables, and intercept operational messages about troop movements along the Gothic Line. But mountainous infiltration was treacherous. The men carried minimal equipment: a coil of insulated tapping wire, a compact listening device with hand crank power, a pair of Sten guns, and rations they hoped would last a week. Their true tools, however, were stealth and endurance. Crossing the Apennines in winter was a trial of will. Nighttime temperatures dropped below freezing, and thick fog settled unpredictably in the valleys. The team advanced through territory patrolled by elements of the German 362nd Infantry Division and supported by the Feldgendarmerie. Each patrol route followed predictable patterns, but only if the OSS had correctly interpreted partisan intelligence, which was not always reliable. One wrong assumption and the team could walk directly into an ambush. An OSS field journal, later recovered from an abandoned safehouse in Bologna, contained a telling note likely written by the unit's communications sergeant. "Terrain deadens all sound. Good for us, good for them. We could be 20 yards apart and never know." That sense of isolation hung over every movement. The men navigated by compass, hugging shadowed ridgelines and moving only during the darkest hours. They slept in small rock overhangs and shepherd huts long abandoned during the war, always posting a rotating guard. After several days of movement, the team finally located the German telegraph lines, strung low along a wooded hillside, partially concealed under brush and anchored by wooden posts spaced at irregular intervals. Their plan required precise execution. They needed to expose a short segment of cable, splice in, and activate their listening device. The operation had to be silent. Even the snap of a twig could draw attention. Every man knew German patrols, accompanied by trained dogs, had passed through the area less than a day earlier. The moment of reveal came during the second night they tapped the line. The device crackled to life with coded bursts, more signals carrying orders from German command posts. One intercepted message discussed repositioning elements of the 16th SS Panzer Grenadier Division, confirming Allied suspicions that reinforcements were shifting northward. Another referred cryptically to relocation of supply reserves, which later analysts interpreted as preparations for a partial German retreat. These transmissions would later prove critical to Allied planners. Yet what the OSS team heard next was far more unsettling. A faint disturbance echoed through the listening device, rumbling vibrations that did not match telegraph traffic. These were rhythmic, metallic, like the thud of boots or the clatter of equipment being moved along the same route. The men froze. The vibrations grew clearer, then faded, then returned again. Someone or something was moving along the telegraph line. But the intercepts gave no indication of scheduled maintenance or patrol timing. Within minutes, whispers drifted through the woods. German voices, cautious and subdued. The patrol was close, too close. The OSS team extinguished all lights, collapsed their gear, and crawled deeper into the underbrush. One operative later wrote that the Germans passed, so close I could smell the tobacco on a guard's coat. The patrol paused at one of the telegraph posts. A dog sniffed the air, growling. For a moment that felt like hours, both sides remained motionless. Then inexplicably the patrol moved on, leaving the team undetected. Historians still debate why the Germans came so near. Some suggest the patrol was performing routine checks. Others believe someone in a local village hinted at irregular movement in the hills. A more mysterious theory, based on post-war interviews, claims that German communications officers suspected an Allied tap after detecting minor signal interference. No conclusive documentation has ever been found to explain the timing. Once the patrol cleared the area, the OSS team rapidly withdrew. They could not risk staying another night. Their maps indicate a grueling retreat route across a frozen ridge and through partisan-controlled zones where loyalty varied, and where the presence of outsiders could provoke suspicion or violence. By dawn 2 days later, exhausted and frostbitten, the team reached an Allied rendezvous point south of the mountains. Operation Creeper was deemed a success. The intelligence obtained directly influenced Allied preparations for offensives against the Gothic Line. Yet the near discovery remained an unsettling question for both analysts and surviving operatives. Had the Germans nearly stumbled upon them by chance, or had someone revealed their presence? The answer remains elusive, one more shadow among the many that cloaked OSS operations in the dying months of the Italian campaign. And as 1945 approached, the need for intelligence only intensified, pushing OSS teams into even more precarious infiltrations, some over land, others by sea, where misdirection, fog, and enemy patrols turned every mission into a gamble with fate. By the spring of 1945, the Axis position in Italy was collapsing, but for the OSS, the final months of the campaign were among the most chaotic and unpredictable. German units were retreating northward in fragmented columns, abandoning supply depots, burning documents, and destroying communication hubs. Amid this turmoil, Allied commanders relied heavily on OSS teams to locate fleeing officials, intercept convoys, and secure intelligence before it vanished into the Alps. Yet what is often overlooked is how many of these last-minute infiltrations were conducted with almost no preparation. The urgency of the moment pushed operatives deep into enemy-held valleys and mountain passes where shifting front lines, desperate German rearguards, and competing partisan factions turned every mission into a high-stakes race against time, and sometimes against history itself. The struggle for intelligence in the closing months of the war was shaped by the rapid disintegration of Nazi command structures. Whole units fled without clear orders. Staff officers destroyed critical documents rather than let them be captured. OSS teams attached to the Fifth Army and the British Eighth Army received fragmented reports of abandoned safe houses, hidden couriers, and secret transport routes leading toward the Austrian border. Many of these tips came from partisans, but not all sources were reliable. In some cases, partisans conveyed rumors shaped by local politics. In others, German deserters offered information in exchange for protection. Sorting truth from falsehood became as important, and as dangerous, as the infiltration itself. One particular OSS detachment, operating out of Florence under the Special Intelligence Branch, was tasked with locating a cluster of abandoned German safe houses rumored to contain files relating to Gestapo operations in northern Italy. The team followed trails through ruined hill villages, over collapsed bridges, and past burned-out command posts. In each location they found the same scene: emptied trunks, scorched documents, and the lingering smell of fuel-soaked paper. A field report written on April 10 described rooms where the walls were black with soot and only the metal frames of filing cabinets remained. The Germans had been thorough. But there were inconsistencies. In some safe houses, certain items appeared untouched: maps left unburned, codebooks missing entire pages, and radio sets still warm, as if someone had left only minutes earlier. One safe house held a set of charred documents that suggested a German courier column had departed eastward toward the Brenner Pass with a sealed crate of unrecovered intelligence. Another contained log entries referencing unknown Allied infiltrators operating weeks before any OSS team had officially reached the region. These irregularities puzzled analysts then, and they continue to raise questions today about how many covert missions took place without ever being recorded. The reveal came from a partisan leader in the Garfanana region, who informed OSS officers about a half-destroyed German convoy found in a ravine near Castelnuovo. Among the debris were fragments of coded reports, a broken courier satchel, and a rusted lockbox with its contents missing. According to his account, local shepherds had spotted two unidentified men removing documents from the wreckage days before the OSS arrived. The descriptions of these men, bearded, wearing ragged civilian clothes, armed with small pistols, did not match any known Allied units. Were they partisans, independent operatives, or remnants of another Allied branch working without formal coordination? The absence of concrete records has left historians debating whether the OSS was unknowingly overlapping with other clandestine groups during the war's final weeks. The most unsettling mystery surfaced toward the end of April, when OSS teams reached an abandoned German communications center near Lake Garda. The site had been partially destroyed, but scattered among the debris were a series of cryptic transmission logs. One log referenced intercepts of hostile agents operating south of the Alps, agents who, according to German notes, were neither OSS nor SOE. Another log mentioned untraceable Allied signals, detected several days before the facility was evacuated. Analysts reviewing the material after the war noted discrepancies in timing and content, suggesting that some Allied infiltrations were never officially recorded, either due to operational secrecy or the chaos of the collapsing front. These findings have fueled modern speculation. Some military historians propose that fragmented OSS and SOE teams, operating under improvised directives, may have crossed paths without realizing it. Others suggest that small Allied reconnaissance units advanced faster than their superiors could track. There is also the possibility that partisans, using captured equipment or improvising radio codes, generated signals that confused both Allied and German intelligence networks. Whatever the explanation, the fog of the war's final months blurred the distinction between official operations, improvised missions, and undocumented actions lost to time. The lesson drawn by modern intelligence officers is clear. In the final stages of conflict, the collapse of enemy structures does not guarantee clarity, it often brings new layers of confusion. Documents disappear, witnesses flee, and information scatters. The OSS, despite its careful record-keeping, could not fully document every infiltration attempted during these final weeks. Some missions never reached headquarters. Some operatives worked without direct oversight. And some disappeared into the mountains, their reports unfinished, their names absent from post-war summaries. As Germany prepared to surrender in Italy on April 29, 1945, the OSS had already begun transitioning to post-war intelligence roles. Yet the lingering gaps, the missing reports, the burned safe houses, the unexplained sightings, remain part of the organization's legacy. Even today, researchers comb archives in Italy, Britain, and the United States, searching for fragments that might explain the mysteries of these final operations. In the end, the closing chapter of OSS activity in Italy is defined not only by success, but by the shadows left behind. Shadows of missions half completed, of files destroyed in haste, of agents working in silence with no surviving record. And in those shadows lies the final enigma. How many OSS infiltrations occurred in Italy's last months, and how many operatives simply never made it back to tell their stories? By early 1945, the war in Italy had entered its final and most volatile phase. The German army clung desperately to its remaining coastal defenses, fortifying every inlet and cliffside from Genoa to La Spezia. It was in this tightening vice that an OSS maritime infiltration team, drawn from the Maritime Unit, the predecessor to modern Navy SEALs, launched one of its most precarious reconnaissance missions. Their objective was to photograph German coastal batteries and radar installations hidden along the Ligurian shoreline, positions that could threaten upcoming Allied naval operations. What most accounts fail to emphasize is how close this mission came to total catastrophe, thanks to a perfect storm of fog, shifting patrols, and uncertain loyalties in the coastal villages. The operation began from a small naval outpost in Bastia, Corsica, where OSS Maritime Unit instructors trained agents in silent swimming, limpet mine deployment, and coastal infiltration. Their equipment was cutting edge for its time. British-made rebreathers, black and rubber suits, and waterproof cameras designed for clandestine photography. The team, 4 Americans and 1 British SOE liaison, memorized shoreline contours, infiltration timings, and escape routes meant to guide them safely back into the open sea. But the seas rarely respect plans. On the night of February 11, 1945, their transport craft, a modified PT boat, launched them toward the Ligurian coast under a moonless sky. A thick fog bank rolled in just as they approached their drop-off point, obscuring the cliffs north of Genoa. Visibility shrank to mere meters. The PT boat captain warned that lingering any longer risked detection by German E-boats known to patrol the area. The team had no choice but to deploy despite the conditions. Their landing was chaotic. Instead of reaching a planned inlet near Punta Chiappa, they drifted nearly a kilometer north, washing ashore on a beach far more exposed than intended. German searchlights swept intermittently across the water from a nearby promontory, forcing the men to bury themselves in shingle and rock shadows. Only after several minutes did they dare to move inland. The struggle began almost immediately. The fog that had concealed their approach now muffled every sound and distorted distances. They scrambled over jagged rocks and terraced hillsides, attempting to locate their first objective, a camouflaged artillery position rumored to overlook a crucial shipping lane. Their waterproof camera captured key intelligence, sandbag revetments, ammunition storage pits, and a radar mast partially hidden beneath netting. Such photographs would later prove vital in assessing German defensive capabilities during the final Allied push. Yet their greatest challenge emerged during the attempted extraction. When the team returned to their rendezvous beach, the fog had thickened into a blinding sheet. Their PT boat could not risk approaching the shore. For the second time that night, their plans were upended. With no safe exfiltration possible, they were forced to hide until the fog lifted, an unthinkable predicament for a team equipped for minutes on land, not days. Moving inland meant entering the precarious politics of a Ligurian fishing village under German occupation. The team found shelter in a small, abandoned boathouse, but their presence soon became known to several villagers who stumbled upon them at dawn. What happened next remains one of the operation's most debated aspects. Some post-war accounts claim the villagers willingly hid the operatives, shielding them from German patrols who regularly checked the shoreline for downed pilots and escaped prisoners. Other testimonies contradict this, suggesting at least one villager informed the local German commander of strangers lurking near the coast. The truth remains unclear, partly because many wartime records from this region were destroyed in the final days of the occupation. What is uncontested, however, is the moment of near discovery on the second day. A German patrol, 6 men and a sniffer dog, searched the beach and surrounding cliffs. Their boots thudded on the floorboards of the very boathouse where the operatives hid beneath fishing nets and rotting nets. One OSS agent later described hearing the dog sniff so close he could feel its breath through the planks. For reasons still debated, the dog never alerted. Perhaps the overpowering smell of fish masked the scent. Perhaps the patrol was fatigued, sloppy, or rushing through its duties. But the brush with discovery marked the tensest minutes of the mission. As evening approached and the fog finally thinned, the team used a crude signaling mirror to alert their offshore PT boat. Extraction required absolute silence. The Germans had grown suspicious after earlier partisan activity in the village. The operatives swam nearly 400 meters to meet the craft, fighting exhaustion and frigid water. When they finally climbed aboard, the boat's commander reportedly said, "We thought you were gone." Modern intelligence officers often point to this mission as a study in improvisation. Plans faltered, conditions changed, and local loyalties fluctuated. Yet the core objective, documenting German defensive positions, was achieved, supplying Allied strategists with critical data. The unanswered question remains whether the village truly protected them or whether German patrols were acting on an anonymous tip. That ambiguity has persisted through decades of interviews and archival searches, leaving a shadowy uncertainty over the operation. As the war approached its final months, the OSS faced increasing dangers and even greater mysteries in their final push across Italy.